Hello, everyone. My name is Svetla Turnin, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Cinema Politica. Tonight's event is the first of our fall 2020 series of online screenings and discussions about radical political film in lieu of our regular event series at Cinema Politica Concordia here in Montreal. Until we can gather and celebrate art and activism once again in the theater, we hope these events will help you stay nourished, engaged, and connected to our fierce community of artists, thinkers, and activists. But before we continue, we acknowledge that Cinema Politica's mothership is located on the unceded lands of the Kantayya Nation. We believe it is not enough to acknowledge the title holders of the lands where we live and work. Rather, we urge everyone who attends or watches our events to become involved in anti-colonial and indigenous-led struggles and resistance in Jojage and beyond. Tonight, we're also hosting our event on the Zoom platform, which has some controversial history and is headquartered on Mawekma Ohlone territory. We acknowledge indigenous stewardship, presence, and sovereignty beyond land and into these virtual spaces as well. It's truly encouraging to see how many of you streamed this essential film. To find out more about our upcoming events and film streaming offers on our Cinema Politica on-demand platform, please follow us on the social media platforms of your choice. Check out our website, cinemapolitica.org, or sign up for our newsletter. Now, a quick breakdown of tonight's event. We'll start with quick introductions, then we'll engage in a conversation with our special guest for about 30 to 40 minutes, after which we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So please don't be shy and send in your questions either via this webinar or through YouTube or Facebook, where we're also live streaming the event. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alex Ketchum, who's faculty lecturer in the Institute for Gender, Sexuality, and Feminist Studies at McGill University, and the director of the Just Feminist Tech and Scholarship Lab. Tonight's event is generously co-presented by the Feminist and Accessible Publishing and Communications Technology Speaker and Workshop Series, of which Alex is also a founder. Alex?
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy that we've gotten the opportunity to work with Cinema Politica for this event tonight, and to also be able to welcome Shalini for this conversation. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the speaker and workshop series. So the Feminist and Accessible Publishing, Communications, and Technology Speaker and Workshop Series seeks to bring together scholars, creators, and people in industry working at the intersections of digital humanities, computer science, feminist studies, disability studies, communication studies, LGBTQ studies, history, and critical race theory. And I want to tell you about some of our upcoming events, which include some of the speakers featured in the film that you've watched for today's conversation. All of our events are free during the semester, they're online, and all of them will be professionally captioned for accessibility. So our next event will be on October 21st, where Dr. Jess McLean will be speaking about the environmental costs and benefits of digital technologies. On October 28th, Alice Wong will be speaking about her book, Disability Visibility, and it'll be a fireside chat. On November 4th, Meredith Broussard, who's featured in the film that you watched for today, will be speaking about her book, Artificial Unintelligence. And finally, for the last event of this semester, on November 11th, Joy Lucy Rankin will be speaking about her book, A People's History of Computing. Our website is disruptingdisruptions.com. That'll be the redirect, where you can also find videos of past events. We posted about 23 already at this point, our podcast, and our schedule. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. The main advantage, of course, of having online events is that we can easily host artists from around the world. And so I'm thrilled to present the director of Coded Bias, Shalini Kantayya. Shalini Kantayya directed the season finale of the National Geographic television series Breakthrough in 2017, and her debut, Catching the Sun, premiered at the LA Film Festival and was nominated for the Environmental Media Association Award for Best Documentary. Coded Bias, the film that most of you, if not all of you, have already seen, or the film that you still have a chance to see on our Cinema Politica On Demand platform until 12 p.m. ET tomorrow. Coded Bias premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival. Shalini Kantayya is a TED Fellow, a William J. Fulbright Scholar, and an associate of the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. And we are beyond thrilled and honored to have her with us here tonight. Shalini? Shalini, I think you're muted.
How is that?
Yes, I can hear you.
Namaste. My name is Shalini Kantayya. I'm thrilled to be here. I want to thank Cinema Politica for having me here today. I'm thrilled. While I miss being in the theater and I'm sorry that the border is closed, I'm so thrilled that we can share a conversation about the issues that matter most in our world together in this way. And I really thank you for bringing us all together and for sharing this film in this context.
It's our pleasure, and hopefully one day we'll be able to host you in Montreal with your next film. So let's maybe start with a few questions. So I was thinking the other day when I was rewatching the film that in the last decade or so of documentary filmmaking, there's been more and more critical discussion around technology and surveillance, but still so little on the encoded bias and prejudice these technologies embody. I was really hoping that you can talk about more about how you came to this topic and what really inspired you to make the film.
I think I make things quite by accident in some ways, in the sense that it never starts off with a political issue or a political agenda. It always starts with a character that moves my heart and inspires my curiosity. A lot of my work has to do with how disruptive technologies impact issues of equality, whether disruptive technologies make the world more fair or less fair. In my last film, Catching the Sun, I was exploring how small-scale solar might uplift the lives of working people. And I sort of stumbled upon the work of Joy Buolamwini and read the books of Cathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, and another book by the Dr. Sophia Noble called Algorithms of Oppression that everyone should read, and sort of stumbled down the rabbit hole of the dark side of technologies that we're using every day and that are often becoming the gatekeeper of opportunities that matter most to us. And, you know, quite like Joy, I went on this journey by accident. I sort of, you know, she's just trying to make a Snapchat filter work on her face of Serena Williams, right? It's an art project that she's doing sort of on a whim for her own joy, and basically stumbles upon the fact that computer vision doesn't see her face. And the implications of that is that commercially available technology that wasn't sitting on a shelf somewhere, it was already being sold to our ICE, our immigration officials here in the States, already being sold to the FBI, already being deployed by police departments across the country, often without anyone elected having any oversight of how these technologies are deployed, often in secret. And while facial recognition is just the thing we can most easily understand in some ways because it's so invasive and it's our face, I sort of began to see how AI is becoming a gatekeeper, deciding who gets hired, who gets health care, how long a prison sentence someone serves. And what was so terrifying for me is that these technologies have not been vetted for racial bias, for gender bias, to prove that they won't do unintended harm to people who might be vulnerable to their consequences. And I thought that we have this huge blind spot in our legislation where we have this wild, wild west. And what I began to see is that everything we love, everything we care about as citizens of a democracy is going to get totally transformed by algorithms and AI. And we see that happening already. And so I'm so grateful to everyone who watched the film and to be able to have conversations about these issues, because I think the first step is to understand how these systems work.
Yes, and your film really helps us, on that first step, to down the path of understanding AI and the madness that we're all coexisting with around us in terms of surveillance technologies. So, what would you say was the most surprising thing you learned while making the film?
I think that we often use the word privacy when we talk about it. And I guess for me, I sort of disconnect when I talk about privacy. It seems like something that's associated with property rights or something. And the word that I would use is invasive surveillance. And I didn't understand the extent of which the kind of invasive surveillance that we're subject to, the kind of data that Google has about us, the kind of data that Facebook has about us. This kind of stuff, that amount of data makes the East German Stasi look like they had a light touch, right? And I didn't understand the level of prediction that we are constantly being sized up by our data, and predictions are constantly being made about who we are. And I think what I really didn't realize is that this is all based on data of a deeply unequal past. And so, if we want to make social progress, do we want to be relying on systems that are replicating data from the past? And these are the dangers that I think lie ahead. And just the other thing I want to say is the level of which that we as human beings are outsourcing our autonomy to machines is alarming. We're living in an age where if you say something and the computer says something, well, I don't care if you have a PhD, you're wrong, right? What the computer says is right. And that is terrifying. Here in the United States, a Detroit man in January was arrested in front of his family and his neighbors, held in his cell for 30 hours, the kind of stuff that you don't recover from in a life. And basically never asked his ID because a computer misidentified him. And in spite of that, the Detroit police is going forward with its use of police recognition. And I realized that this can be the new stop and frisk, that this can replicate systematic inequalities in ways that have real impacts on people's civil rights.
Absolutely. And can you say something has changed since you made the film? Have you seen a change for the better or for the worse in that regard?
Well, I will say this, we're at the beginning of this conversation, which is why I'm so excited to talk with you and for you to share this film with your colleagues and your neighbors. But basically in June, we saw sea change that I never thought possible in the making of this film. We saw IBM very notably said they were getting out of the facial recognition game. They would not research it, deploy it, or sell it. Microsoft said they would not sell facial recognition to police departments, and Amazon said they would press a 1-year pause. Now, this sea change happened, I think, most notably because of the brave research of women scientists in my film, notably Black women scientists in my film, Joy Belamwini, Deborah Raji, and Timnit Gebru, for proving this technology was racially biased. But also, this change was made possible by scientists speaking out unencumbered of corporate interests, speaking truth to power. And then on the other side, engaged citizens taking the street and making the connection between invasive, racially biased surveillance technologies and the struggle for the inherent value of Black life, and connecting those two issues. And so now we have a model of scientists speaking truth to power unencumbered by corporate interests, and engaged citizens who then hold politicians accountable and ask them to legislate, not for corporations who are giving them lobbyist money, but for the people. And it was an amazing gesture that we never thought possible. But unless we continue the heat sort of on these big technology companies, and they're not just here in the US, Toronto is becoming one of the biggest technology hubs in the world as well. But unless I feel that we have a moonshot moment for ethics and technology. And we're living in a moment where the cement is not dried in the technologies of the future. And it's sort of up to us, we the people, to hold companies accountable and say, we will not trade our civil rights. Facebook, if you decide to be an undemocratic institution by saying you won't protect the integrity of political speech, we will be calling our legislators to legislate you and to put down regulations on your conduct. And I think we're just in the beginning of that conversation. But I want to say, because we're living in a moment of intense pain, that I want to acknowledge that I make documentaries because they remind me that everyday people can make a difference. And I have seen just that in the making of Coded Bias. And what I've come to believe is that our biggest enemy is not actually Amazon. It is actually our own apathy. And so if a few of us can get together and go to your town hall, you see people banning facial recognition city by city in their police departments. You see more and more people recognizing data rights are human rights. And I think the more that we can do that, we're going to see the change, because we can't opt out of these technologies. Just like us, this is the only way we can be together today. And we shouldn't have to trade our civil rights in the terms of conditions of these technologies.
Absolutely, that is a great takeaway, to take from this event, of course. Alex, would you like to jump in here? I know you also had a few questions prepared.
Yes, thank you so much. So first of all, I want to thank you, Shalini, again for making this fantastic film. And a lot of the films and kind of popular discourses we often see around tech really center ethics as the key question, whereas your film really centers questions around justice and injustice. And I was wondering, and that's actually something I really liked about the film too, but I was wondering if you can speak a bit more about your decision to kind of frame the film in this way.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never thought of my film in that terms, ethics versus justice issues. Well, I think that what I was attempting to do was, translate the science. The data scientists and mathematicians in my film are some of the smartest people I've ever interviewed. And I've interviewed very smart people, and they were brilliant. I think there were 7 PhDs in my film. I literally couldn't talk to people at parties for 2 years because I was trying to figure out what I was saying with my film and the film I was making. But I think there were 2 things I was trying to do, is that knowledge actually is power. And AI has been framed much in the white male imagination, both literally and figuratively, both through the science fiction that we get, of which I'm a big fan, where there are a lot of myths about people sleeping with their AI. If you look at like films like Blade Runner and all these other things. And I think I also tend to center feminists in my film. And I think that I was trying to connect the science to the people it mattered most to. And I think that's often things that people don't understand. I was recently speaking to a group of AI researchers, and they tell me that they're not often reacquainted. Like the person who's in the lab designing facial recognition thinks, oh my goodness, I'm designing something that is going to help detect autism really early on and save lives in this particular way. They're not thinking about the 14-year-old boy in the UK who just got stopped and frisked by 5 plainclothes police officers and doesn't understand why. And so for me, I think I tried to get to the stories of the people who have been most vulnerable to these technologies. You know, the Brooklyn residents, they're not trying to do anything. They didn't even know what biometric data was. They're just trying to live in the same apartment building that they've lived in for generations. And their landlord wants to put in this invasive surveillance, and the company is doing it for free. This talks about what these economic models are. But then what are they doing with all that data? And I came to see how these technologies are experimented on in communities of color, in communities of people who don't have rights. And if they're successful, as Virginia Eubanks points out, then they get rolled out to the rest of us. And so it was very important for me to connect AI to the people it might hurt, which is some of the stories that we often don't hear in this sort of what in this romanticism, what Meredith Broussard calls techno-chauvinism, you know, this idea that technology is this white knight that's going to save us all. It won't.
Definitely. And your film is so great at balancing so many issues. It's so comprehensive in many ways. You look at how you cover policing, credit, hiring, healthcare, housing, predatory practices, advertising, education, laws, sentencing, and social credit. It's so many topics. And then you show how it's working in research and popular culture and history. And so you have so many topics. And I'm wondering how you decided to balance the film in this way. Like, was it centered kind of somewhat around Joy's story as the point, or like kind of what was your kind of spark to center it around?
The center was definitely Joy. I knew that there was a character that she was a very special character and that she would go on a journey, and I sort of was betting on her as a filmmaker, and I think I was right. She's quite extraordinary. But I also wanted to say that, you know, it would have been much easier for me to make a film focused on facial recognition. But I think for me, I really wanted to tackle this invisible hand, this silent nudge that we've not examined yet in our society. And like I said, you know, facial recognition is sort of the most invasive form of surveillance, and it helps us understand how other predictive technologies are working. But we haven't yet really come to terms with the fact of how much power that silent nudge has. Even like your Netflix queue, would you like to watch this? Would this, you know, how much we're being influenced by this sort of silent hand, this nudge of power in our lives.
Thank you. I was wondering if Zelta wanted to jump in again, or
oh yes,
okay. Great.
This is truly a fascinating discussion. I just wanted to jump in and invite our audiences on the different platforms and here in this webinar to send in their questions. I believe Alex has a couple of more, and then we can open it up. But if you send them a little early, then, you know, you'll help us tremendously. So please do so.
So yeah, I guess I'll ask maybe one more question, which is, so your film, I mean, it came out pretty recently, and it seems like every day we're getting more and more updates and new stories of new things that are happening with AI and machine learning and the deployment of algorithms. And I'm wondering how, in the process of making the film, you dealt with these constant news updates and kind of how you decided to put an end point on the film, because it seems like it's something you could just keep working on and never ending the project.
My editor Zachary would be laughing right now, because the joke is that this film keeps going on, and I even put the slates in June. I mean, I really hope the film would be developed into a series, because honestly, there's so much content there. We're just at the beginning of a conversation, and it's really my hope that at some point in the future there will be an episode just on AI and healthcare and bias, and one just on criminal justice AI and bias, and just one on misinformation, because it's sort of worthy of deep examination. And I think I took a risk by sort of bringing so many things into it, but I just felt that it was important. And I think I stumbled down the rabbit hole, and I wanted to share. I feel I owe a debt of gratitude to the brilliant and badass cast of my film for sort of schooling me, and in turn allowing to give my audience an education about how these technologies intersect with civil rights.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always like in the film, you keep feeling like, oh my gosh, now it's going to be the thing next. And it just keeps you so intrigued. And maybe I'll ask one last question as we're kind of awaiting questions from the audience, which is, can you talk a little bit more about the process of all the interviewees? You had mentioned that you had read Kathleen O'Neill's book, but there's also this really poignant moment in the film where Joy's talking about when she first read Kathy's book and was in the bookstore. And I'm wondering if the kind of choice to center some of the different experts in your film came from asking the experts who inspired them, or was it like can you speak a little bit to that process?
I'm so grateful that you framed the question, and and I love that you're coming from a feminist background, because usually in every screening I've ever had, people are like, why is it all women? That's how they sort of tackle the issue. If anything I'm proud of, I think that the film gives voice to a canon that has existed for decades within Silicon Valley. My work is off of the backs of feminists, activists, researchers, and writers and artists who have been critiquing Silicon Valley for ages. And I am so grateful because, I actually didn't realize that the people leading this movement actually are women, and non-binary, are of color, are LGBTQ, and the people in my film, they have these advanced degrees, but they also come from some sort of marginalized community where they were outsiders. And because of that, I feel like are able to shine a light into these dark places and blind spots in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's something I loved about the film. I'm teaching a class next semester, and I told all my students, watch this film because we're reading all these people's books. It's so great. Salta, did you want to jump in with a question? Yep. Salta, I think you're muted. Sorry. Okay. Great.
Yes, too many buttons to click on at all times. I just wanted to jump in and say that your choice of subjects in the film was extremely refreshing and so important and so ground shattering in comparison to almost anything and everything on technology we as programmers at Cinema Politica have ever seen. That words don't suffice to say how grateful we are for that. I just had actually a question about how you feel about the ways in which we've been so much more thrust into these technologies because of COVID, right? The pandemic at the moment. And I was just wondering what tools we can use to thread cautiously and to decode as we go.
Yes, I mean, I wish I could say that, like, there's technologies that are a little better. Blue Jeans is a little better than Zoom, and Signal is a little better than, some of the other technologies. Um, there are definitely things that are coded. There's some great, there's a few foundations that are committed to internet privacy, and some of them have training courses around, his name is Trevor. I'm losing his it might be the Center for Internet Privacy, but I'll look it up. But there, if you're an activist or you're a journalist, which I know your audience may be, there are some tools that you can use to sort of protect yourself at some level. But what I really hope is that we get some legislation. I'm not familiar with the Canadian model. What coded bias sort of looks at is sort of three different approaches to data protection. You sort of seen the China example where someone has unfettered access to data, and you have this authoritarian regime using your face like a credit score in what Kathy O'Neill calls like algorithmic obedience training, the most severe form of authoritarianism and tracking. And then you have the US, where actually we don't know what's going on because we don't have any laws. It's very much why I had to go to the UK for some form of transparency, even to capture those scenes, because these black box algorithms are often used in secret in ways that we can't question. And so that's really it. And then, in Europe, and for now UK, because we don't know if what rights they're going to hold on to. We have the GDPR, which I think is the first framework that really puts data rights in a human rights framework. And because some of our data transits through Europe, some of us as global citizens have rights, like David Carroll, who took up a lawsuit against Cambridge Analytica because his data transited Europe. So he had some protection under the GDPR. So it's really my hope and for some regulation and as far as civilized societies in North America, we're looking to you, Canada, to lead, because I really think if more industrialized countries can pass legislation that regulates their tech sector, that the US will follow suit. In other words, when the GDPR was passed, some technology companies changed laws here in the States because it was easier to make one law for everyone rather than to have different data practices. And it's my belief that it's much like a global issue. And I hope that at some point we will have some global declaration of data rights as human rights.
Thank you. I think we're going to ask some questions from the audience. So the first question is from Miriam. And Miriam asks, will you make a follow-up film to show where we've perhaps landed in 5 years or later?
Yes. I mean, I think that I will explore the topic. The topic has definitely caught my imagination. Of course, I'm sort of capable of other things. I feel like I made a film about solar, and people would only talk to me about clean energy at parties for 2 years. I can talk about other things, but it is definitely a sector that has my imagination and is constantly surprising me and shocking me as I research. So it's definitely rich for an artist's imagination to keep creating in this space with these themes.
I have a question here from the audience. I'm not sure who asked it, but here's the question. I teach digital ethics and justice to teens. Do you have thoughts on ways to frame these issues in a way that resonates with youth? when they perhaps can't yet relate to the larger risks to democracy of invasive surveillance. I think the question is from Zoe.
Well, thank you, Zoe, for working with youth. I think youth activism played a huge role in turning the tide in, well, on our streets in the US for the largest movement for civil rights and equality that we've seen in 50 years. I'm deeply grateful to the youth taking the streets all over the country in a movement for empathy, I think. I think for me, the reason I make film is that there's stories I can't express in words. So I would play for them the 14 seconds where a 14-year-old child gets stopped by plainclothes police officers. I watched that scene probably, I don't know how many times, hundreds of times in editing. I don't think that the hair ever, like, I don't think I ever watched it without goosebumps, because it's just such an upsetting moment. And seeing a Black British child, 14 years old, in school uniform, being pulled over by 5 plainclothes police officers and doesn't even know why. The whole stop was done and over, and the child doesn't know why. And a human rights observer has to explain to him why he was stopped by 5 plainclothes police officers. I think if you just share that moment, I mean, that's why I make films and don't talk to people. is I think that there's nothing I can say that speaks louder than seeing that moment. And so I would just tend to share that as a teaching moment. And I think that is why those personal stories with encoded bias were so important to me, because if you engage them of saying, like, should a machine decide whether a teacher is a good teacher? What would that look like? Should a machine decide how risky someone is without any empathy? Like, and that's what's just also, you know, we haven't even actually talked about this larger thing that I sort of explore in the film, which is, what is intelligence? And I think that we're in a moment globally where we're being asked to lead from a deeper place in our humanity. And we cannot act that, you know, and so it is through that. I actually make the argument in the film that intelligence without empathy, intelligence without ethics is not intelligence. And so within that, we have to have a framework to contain that, because that's not actually intelligence. And so we're at a moment where we have to drop deeper into ourselves. And sometimes that means being uncomfortable. If you work at a tech company and you see something that's not working, it is up to you to raise your hand and be uncomfortable and take the risk and say it. And so I think as much as possible, engaging youth in the human stories of the people that's hurting, I think they'll get it probably sooner than we will.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
The next audience question actually has a bit to do also with that moment in the film and the segment on Big Brother Watch. Mm-hmm. And Andre asks, there's a moment in the film in which a politician gets involved in info tracking. So I think this is with the Big Brother Watch scene. Andre writes, I want to think that this is shown to tell us that the subject is taken seriously only when powerful figures can be affected. Did this segment of the film have those intentions? And then Andre also writes, thank you for that masterpiece. I hope it opens many minds.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think that's what the thing is that, well, we're only as safe as the most vulnerable among us. We've learned that, right? So our human rights are decided by the most marginalized among us. And so to see someone in a position of power who's on a secret watch list in the UK, and she's a baroness tasked with regulating the police, and she's on a watch list because she's for solutions to climate change, right? And she finds out quite by accident if it could happen to her, what's going to happen to us? And I think that that's what we've seen. When it happens to the powerful, what hope can the rest of us have? And that was why that was important. And I just want to say, Big Brother Watch is incredible. And you talk about young people. Those were 3 young people sitting in a small office in London, basically holding back the Metropolitan Police from real-time facial recognition deployment at scale. So I've seen again, young people sort of at the forefront of this movement.
I think Svelta has some more questions from our social media platforms.
Yes, there's a question here, whether or not you could comment on the Canadian-United States-Mexico agreement as it may relate to artificial intelligence and data sharing.
I actually don't have expertise in that, and I would prefer not to comment on things I don't have expertise on.
Okay, and another one is, once again, that might be similar actually, you could elaborate on how artificial intelligence is integrated in the immigration system.
Yes.
CBSA.
I think we know that racially biased facial recognition was being used by our immigration police. And the truth is that we don't know how it's being used by our immigration officials. We know that Amazon's recognition was being marketed to ICE officials. But again, a lot of these tools are used in secret. And so I don't have accurate data on how it's being used and to the extent it's being used.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if there is any more questions. Maybe this is last call for questions. I guess we can wait a few seconds more. Our team members are telling me that there's no more questions on our social media platforms. I don't see anything in the Q&A here. Alex, where are you at? Do you have anything to add or any more questions maybe for Shalini?
I mostly just want to say again how great this film is. And I think it's a really great film for people who haven't yet watched it, because of course people can still stream it for another day till 12 Eastern time tomorrow. That even if you have no background in tech or AI or machine learning, you're going to get so much from this film. Even if you think you're an expert in AI and machine learning, you're going to get so much from this film, because this film does such a great job of putting so many topics into conversation with each other and really raises a lot of the voices that we often don't hear, especially in mainstream representations around technology. So I really hope that if you're seeing this Q&A now, that you go and stream the film if you can.
Thank you. And I just want to express my solidarity in terms of, I love Cinema Politica and what you're doing, because I believe deeply in the power of film to change the world. And that through film, we can cross borders and explore ideas that are radically different than us, and have this experience of empathy with people who are different than us. And it's my belief that it's actually empathy that is the spark for social change. And so I'm so grateful to present the film in this context. And it's my hope that you will share the film with your colleagues and talk about it, because it really is how the world changes.
Thank you very much. Building connections between people, audiences and artists and the subjects in the films we show has really been the core part of our mandate for so many years. I'm sure that's a big part of Alex's work as well, because empathy and technology don't seem to always come up in the same sentence, at least in the context that we experience on a daily basis. I really am incredibly grateful that we had the chance to share your film and have you with us here tonight. I truly hope that many more people are going to see the Q&A online, because one of the advantages of these virtual Q&As is that they stay for posterity and we can share them and disseminate them far and wide. And we're truly hoping to find other ways in which to exhibit your work, not just this film, but other films in the future. So I'd like to thank you very much, Shalini. Thank you so much to Alex as well and her series. And please, everyone, watch the film. There's still a chance to catch it until 12 o'clock p.m. ET tomorrow. And if not, send us a message. Maybe we'll be able to connect you to other ways to see the film into the future. So thank you once again. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you so much.